how to teach the heart to love, I think it still is a timely topic, not just because it's Valentine's Day month, which is how I pick the topics based on candy hearts and little cards that you can send your friends, but because we know that compassion is a balm. It's a balm to our bodies and our minds. Has anybody, let's do, because we're not going to shout out loud, but maybe put up your hand if you want to. Have you ever received compassion and felt it as a balm to your body and mind, right? Somebody understood you, or you got a hug when you were in time of need, or you got, medicine when you needed it. And these acts of compassion are actually, they're not only healing whatever that thing was in the moment, but the compassion itself is a healing force in our lives. The research shows that compassion not only upgrades our immune system. This is why some of those old myths about, some nurses, like their immune system, it's not just because they're getting sick. Please wear your personal protective equipment. But there are some of these myths where it's like, oh yeah, they got a strong immune system because they love people. Well, they tested that. You actually get, I don't know, cytokines or IG something or other, upgrades when you have this compassion flowing through you. Pretty cool. Your cortisol and adrenaline get modulated. Your stress response, in short, gets modulated, gets moderated by the feeling of compassion. Of great interest to a lot of us sometimes is that actually compassion can have pain relief effects. There's a lot of great research that when you call to mind care for another, it reduces your subjective experience of pain. It's a pretty neat thing, and we're just getting started on all the benefits, researching all the benefits that are possible with compassion. So compassion is epic. And yet, if you're like me, I don't know if you noticed, but there's been this kind of just upsurge and just public popularity of bullying, I think, or the popularity of consent violation, it's back in vogue. It's well, enough about your needs. Let's centralize my needs above. I love your needs. Each one of us, the inherent worth and dignity but what if we could consider each other during our free and responsible search for truth? That would be cool. Why do I mention this? To bring you down? No, hopefully we'll bring this all the way up, but they told me good speakers highlight the challenge at the beginning of the talk and then resolve it later. For people like me, it's been a little hard to keep that wellspring of compassion bubbling. The wellspring is, I've had to dig down a little deeper. This old heart, I had to, go to HBE equipment rentals, get a bigger drill, see, is there any more compassion down at the bottom there? The well, I don't know, extend the rope for the bucket, see if we can get down. It's been hard to get that compassion working lately. So I have personally this sense, I know how good compassion is for me, not to mention those around me. If I've got that well flowing, people around me are going to be a lot happier than if I don't. And it's gonna boost all of this stuff. And I need those boosters. I need those upgrades personally, especially. But because of the world that we see, it can be a little hard to get that compassion engine running in the morning. I just mixed my metaphors. Whoops. So one was a well, another one's an engine, but been doing a lot of work on my land lately. So I think we need to teach the heart how to love, because our own hearts need to remember how to love. It's not just starting fresh how to love. We forget how to love, and we may need a 102 course. Oh yeah, I took How to Love 101 back in 2006. It was a great course. I think we haven't been doing our CEUs, some of me, and it's time for a refresher course. The other thing this is my positioning, my sales pitch, why you might want to stay for the rest of the sermon that I'm going to try to keep short so you can all mingle over coffee or the beverage of your choice. We're an inclusive community. You do not have to drink coffee to be a UU, regardless of what the propaganda out there may say. You don't have to own a cat. You don't have to like coffee. But you do have to like the 6th UU principle a little bit, which is the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. You do have to like that to be a UU. You can't really, well, I like, 1 through 5 and then 7 is great. But, I kind of just want to take care of me and nobody else. No, there's this beloved community thing that's like, right as it reaches the crescendo, right as we're like, yeah, we're about to come home to that interconnected web, there's this little, I don't know, is it a discordant note? Right before, beloved community, and then you bring it home. You can't leave that one out. And maybe the bad news is you also can't imprison, sanction, punish, or mandate a beloved community into existence. If you're gonna bring about a loving community on the face of the interconnected web that we all live and move and have our being in, you're gonna need a lot of loving hearts to make the thing happen. So if we're interested in that, while we are not a very evangelical tradition, we might be very interested in how hearts come to love, because if there's not some way that we can participate in facilitating more loving hearts on planet Earth, our mission, our goal of world community it's not gonna work out too well. It's not gonna work out too well. So I think this is a very important topic for personal as well as global reasons. How to teach the heart to love. That's what the title's about. Okay, so in addition to the 6th UU principle, we have the one that we all remember, 1 and 7, right? The inherent worth and dignity of every person, we honor it. And then 7, the interconnected web. And then there's some stuff in between. We're like, Reverend Fajan mentioned that one once upon a time. Well, anyway, in addition to the 6th, that beloved community one, we have our first. Okay, the first principle means 2 things, in my opinion. This is the setup here for the rest of the talk. First thing it means, I think, is that we have the potential as human beings to be loving, compassionate, pro-social, and because of that, pretty happy beings. This is our inherent worth and dignity. And I joked with Dave earlier. He said, what song should we do? And I said, oh, how about Kiss? I was made for loving you, baby. But I didn't remember what else might be in that song. I only know the chorus, so I'm not sure. You never quite know with those guys. But we're actually made to be loving beings. Like, that's part of our design as Homo sapiens, is that we're made to be loving. So this is really cool. I think that's one of the things that is meant by the fact that we have inherent dignity. Not everyone has come into their inheritance, but we've got like a trust fund of dignity just waiting for us to be mature enough to unlock it. The second thing, though, is that we inheritors of great humanist traditions, believe that you don't have to level up to be worthy of basic human dignity. That's why as UUs, we are actively against places like Guantanamo Bay. We're actively against things like waterboarding. That's why we as UUs are actively campaigning to get prisons that look more like, what is it, Norway or something, where they have like, there's no violence when you ask people, and they have very, very low recidivism, because you treat people like dignified people. Even the ones who are outcasts and lawbreakers and rule breakers, you refuse to dehumanize them, because there's a baseline. You do not have to earn basic dignity. And in Unitarian Universalist theology, that's our dignity. We demonstrate our dignity when we treat each other as humans, without putting a price on basic humanity. Okay, we may need to establish some boundaries and consequences, but we don't revoke the humanity of others. Because of this, we need to study how the heart learns to love. Because when compassion is hard, it becomes easy for us to revoke the humanity of others. And in a world where compassion is hard all the time, just imagine, like, I can't hardly tell behind the masks, but I thought from the eyes, I got some empathy when I said, oh, compassion's a little hard today. So imagine in a room full of people who are committed to it, if it's that hard for us, how hard is it for people who aren't naturally rooting for the first UU principle? How hard must it be to crack that thing open just a little bit? I think we need to study how the heart learns to love. If we could get in touch with this second meaning of the first, this just got really blueprinty. The second meaning of the first UU principle. If we could get in touch with meaning 2 of principle 1, meaning B, principle 1, meaning B. The idea that human beings shouldn't have to level up to be worthy of basic dignity. If we could get ourselves on board that and, like, I don't know, get like maybe 10% more of the American population on board with that, let alone the world, we would be well on our way to our goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. It's not that far to tip the scales. And if we had that baseline, just basic human dignity, it lowers the bar for what it means to be loving and open-hearted, because I can get there every day. I can get to the place where at least I don't revoke the humanity of others. So we've got 3 principles. That's how I make this quick, is I break it up into 3 principles. The first one, you were made for love. You were made for love. How do you teach? I asked my partner, I always do, if I want a little extra inspiration that comes from a totally different angle than the way I think. I said, how do you teach the heart? With no segue, I just asked her, I gave her coffee as a bribe. And then, how do you teach the heart to love? And her immediate response was, you don't have to teach the heart to love. Hearts are made for love. It's like, oh, geez, you're so wise. Do you want to go down there on Sunday for me? And somebody wise should be leading that show. So this comes back to our first principle, that in a way, you don't have to teach the heart to love. You just have to unlearn everything else. This is backed up by neuroscience. Meditation teacher and MD that I really like, Rick Hanson, he says your triune brain, which is kind of an outmoded model, but it works good as a metaphor. They say you've got a velociraptor down at the bottom of your brain, and then you've got a cute Rottweiler in the middle, and you've got a little thin paste of human on top, right? That brain, when it is not threatened, when it's not stressed out, when it's not injured, is naturally, the Rottweiler is naturally calm. I'm sorry, the Velociraptor, they sound kind of alike. I should pick new creatures. The T-Rex is naturally calm. The Rottweiler is naturally compassionate. And the little human is naturally curious. This is when you're not threatened, when you're not stressed out, your brain's default is to be calm, compassionate, and curious. This is really good news. It's not like you have to go and, like, it really is. You just have to get a bigger drill, maybe, in my case, to get down back to the heart of compassion in that well. But it's not like you've got to, like, build an aqueduct from somewhere up. Analogies aren't my thing today. Sorry, guys. But you don't have to create the heart of love. It's what you're already made for. But what blocks this? Distress blocks this. Threat blocks this. When we get threatened, I tried to come up with 3 C's to match these 3 C's, but let's see, the T-Rex gets cantankerous. Let's say cantankerous. And the Rottweiler gets closed-hearted, and the human gets cognitively dissonant. Yeah, just plain old crabby, right? So our minds close, and we're not able to be curious about new vantage points, right? Our heart closes, and we're kind of like, the dogs that we really ought to rescue. They're usually not bad dogs. They're really loving doggos. They've had bad circumstances. Okay, T-Rexes, I don't know who's gonna hug them, but as long as you don't poke them with a stick, you might be okay. So our natural state is these 3 C's of calm, compassionate, and curious. So what does this mean? It means if we want to create the goal of world community, we have to create the circumstances where people can let down their guard, come to rest, and feel safe. How was that meditation? I had my eyes closed. I needed that meditation this morning. But how was that when we like lit up compassion and we were like, let's spread it out. Let's make a compassion space. It felt kind of good, right? At least to the 3 of us. Okay, good. So if that's the good news is that's all we actually have to do to reinvoke our potential to be loving beings is to create safe spaces. It's the opposite, though, of what most of our news stations do, right? I was talking to a therapist friend of mine the other day, and one of the main interventions, he works with really challenged populations, and one of the main interventions he gives right now is do not watch the news, right? It's not about being out of touch. It's about not being continually subjected to threats. Our little love maker doesn't work when you're continually subjecting it to threats. It has to feel safe, it has to feel at ease, and it has to feel a sense of community. You already heard me harp on the prison system, but this is also the opposite of what we do with our correctional system in the United States. We punish a heart that isn't capable of love by subjecting it to greater stresses and more threats than what maybe even originally caused that injury. It's a backwards way to go about creating a beloved community. You cannot insult someone into open-heartedness unless they're like a reincarnated Tibetan master. I've heard of some of those. They did fMRIs on them and they're like, you're a jerk. And their brain was like, wow, I love you. But the rest of us, don't do that to me. I'm not ready for that. If you want me to behave nicer, just ask. Make a praise sandwich if you can. We all need a little praise sandwich these days. So first step, if you want to create the beloved community, start strategizing. How can we create safe spaces? And not just safe spaces for us, but you could start there. We could start creating this as a safe space. But we need safe spaces that ripple out to those who need it the most, who are likely the ones we don't want to create safe spaces for. First way we teach a heart to love is not so much by teaching, but by allowing it to disarm and return to its default settings of calm, compassionate, and curious. Number 2, teach the heart to love by modeling empathy. Those of you who have studied education or child rearing know that, if you've hung out with a little person and you try to tell them not to say that naughty word that they hear you say 18 times a day, how good does that work? Doesn't work too well, because we learn by what we've been modeled, not do as I say, not as I do. No, bro, doesn't work that way. The brain doesn't work that way. We have to learn through modeling. Okay, the good news in research, secure attachment. I talked about it last week. You know about it. This is when a little child feels felt by someone. When they hurt, they have the sense that, oh, someone hurts with me a little bit when I hurt. When they try to be understood, they have the sense that maybe the other person doesn't understand it, but they're trying to understand them. This develops into what we call secure attachment. Kids who feel felt have secure attachment, and the research shows that kids who have secure attachment figures in their life at a young age are more capable of empathy and emotional intelligence when they grow up. Really pretty cool. So already now you've got another set of marching orders, right? Go out there, and is there legislation that's going to make sure that little kids have access to secure attachment figures? Could be something cool to research. The good news is, even if you didn't have access to secure attachment figures as a child, you can get what they call earned secure attachment. So if you're lucky, you've got somebody like, probably I'll pick on Dave again, because if you talk to him, most of the time at least, I'd probably bribe him with a coffee too. Works on my wife, I think it works. Yeah, it works on Dave. But if you talk to him, you're like, hey, can I share something with you? People's eyes do this thing where they're listening. He'll like soften up, and you go like, oh, he's going to actually listen. What the heck? If you get enough of that as an adult, you can earn yourself secure attachment. The other cool place you could do this is in therapy. Okay, does anybody want to self-identify that you have had the healing power of therapy? You went, you talked it out, and they were like, sounds like this. And you're like, oh, you get me. It does sound like that, doesn't it? It sounded like that for a really long time in here. Right? And then you walk out and you're like, how did I get 10 pounds lighter without ever doing keto? This is great. It's because you got empathized with. So it's kind of back to principle number one, that if we can figure out how to disarm a little bit, that natural lovingness comes up. But the more we are empathized with, the more we uncover the capacity to empathize. You can't punish people into love and empathy, but you can be empathetic toward them. Or if you're thinking more structurally, you can create society-wide structures that provide empathy and secure attachment. If we want people to learn to give a darn about the climate or the health of others, how can we make sure that there are opportunities to develop this earned, secure attachment? It's a question I don't really hear on, my liberal news media, which is the only kind I listen to. Have at it, internet. And I still don't usually, sometimes I do on NPR. Every once in a while, on a podcast on NPR, I will hear, how do you actually change people's hearts to care about others? But most of the time, this is this very rare esoteric information. How do you actually get people to care about climate change? Right? Because whatever the person in office right now writes in, as we realized, the next one can write right out. It's an interesting challenge that faces us. And for ourselves, if we want to survive with hearts alive and not shut down, we have to go to therapy, or we have to go out to coffee with a friend. If we don't feel felt, it's extremely difficult to turn on that same capacity for others, right? So in the world of normalizing bullying and consent violations on the daily, it makes a whole lot of sense that you don't have a lot of empathy and compassion available, because the world is sending you this message that your feelings and needs don't matter. It's a bogus message, right? We know it's not true. If you just come here, here's your advertisement, come to UUFLG every Sunday and we'll give you the opposite message. But if you just listen to what your availability heuristic will tell you, it's that your feelings and your needs don't matter. Is it any wonder then that somebody asks for some care from us and we go like, okay, but it's gonna break me for 3 days. I only have that much care left. And it's either you or me. So here you go, right? It's no wonder we need to feel felt. Okay, last note. Compassion though is easy as 1, 2, 3. Here's the upswing they told me to end the sermon on. So compassion is easy as 1, 2, 3. And I wanted to review, some of you have heard this from me. I learned it from a book from Kelly McGonigal, who's a researcher up at Stanford over here, over there, who says that the process of developing compassion, like in a moment, like if I saw one of you hurting, how I got to compassion actually has 3 distinct steps in it. The first one is called empathic or empathetic. Empathetic, that's the one. You got to sound them out and see which one feels right to know which one it is. Empathetic distress. First one is called empathetic distress. So this is the thing, it's a bummer because if it doesn't hurt a little bit, we can't get to that healing balm of compassion. The research behind this is actually, I think it's, I didn't go back and look this up, but I think it's opioids that actually reduce empathy because you like physically can't feel pain, they found. Really weird. So like certain kinds of painkillers reduce our empathy and our emotional intelligence because we actually have to feel the other person's pain inside of ourselves to get to compassion. Okay, for everybody in this room and in that room on the TV, this one's probably pretty easy. This is the one we might be thinking, gosh, might be a good idea if I could do less of that a little bit. Maybe if I could just calm down the feeling everybody else's pain, I could go to work today. That seems like a good idea. Well, good news. Step 2 is being able to distance yourself from that pain and look at it objectively. To be able to say, that's them hurting. This is me caring for them. So to not feel swamped by, you need a spark of empathic distress, and then you need a certain degree of distance from that to know that that's not you. The third step is you have to have a sense of agency. You have to have a sense that there's something that you can do. And this is one of the ones that is really quite difficult. Again, I mean, try not to blame the media for everything, or the social media, even worse. But we do get this idea that there are a lot of problems, and we don't hear a lot about what to do in 5 minutes from now to solve that problem. How do I contribute? How do I participate? And it's one of the fundamental ingredients in how you make the medicine of compassion. So when you know these 3 steps, what's really neat is you can troubleshoot, where's my compassion well going offline? Where's my well pump in this version of the I told you today is not metaphor day for me, but where's my well pump of compassion going offline? Is it that I just can't feel others? Maybe it's been too much. I've just numbed out. Okay, I'm with you. Go to your room. There's some good shows on Netflix right now. Reverend approved. But for others of us, we're feeling it so much that we forget to take a step back and just be me. Come to meditation class at 12:30 before you go home. Find out what those shows are on Netflix. Or healthier is probably go to the dog, play frisbee with your go to the park, play frisbee with your dog. It turns off the mind really nicely, right? You just separate from everything else. But the last one is that we have to, even if we have to create it, to get ourselves to flop over into compassion and not be just overwhelmed by the distress of others or just trying to distance ourselves. We have to even at least make up the idea that there's something we can do. We Buddhists specialize in this. There are all of these esoteric methods where they like imagine that you could pull the distress out of someone like a smoke, and then in your heart is a little star of your basic, inherent worth and dignity. And that smoke goes in and the light of compassion transforms it, and then you radiate love back to them. And they do these visualizations. And what we realize when you scan the brain is your brain doesn't distinguish so much between imagination and reality. You think you just did something. It's really kind of cool. And then there's some weirder research that says me over here thinking good thoughts at you sometimes has a weird effect across the room over there. We don't exactly know what's doing it, but pheromones or body language or something like that. So even down to these places where I'm imagining, may you have happiness and the causes of happiness, boo boo, can flop you right over from being borne down by emotional distress, attempting to Netflix my way back into my own reality and out of the reality of everyone else weighing down on. All we need to know is I know what I'll do today. I'll give $5 to the ACLU. And it's enough to get your brain and your heart to flop over into making the medicine of compassion that not only restores our bodies, but should be your primary export to others. Compassion is easy as 1, 2, 3. With these 3 steps applied in order, we have a key to keeping the heart open and engaged and letting empathy be our superpower and not our biggest weakness. Occasionally, empathy, the rally I saw driving down the street the other day, there was a lot of flag waving, and I had the sense that they wanted me to think that empathy was my biggest weakness. But I'm here to let you know that empathy is your biggest superpower. if we do care about this goal of world community, one that honors the inherent worth and dignity of all of us coming together, we have to figure out how to get hearts to wake up to love. If ours aren't able to do that, if the well ran dry, we're not going to be very happy. I mean, we might be able to do that work a little bit. I haven't, but we're certainly not going to be very happy about doing it. But when we have this well of compassion active, you can actually start setting up a little water delivery service. You can develop so much that you have some to give away. Empathy can become your superpower. Because it's the first UU principle, we come equipped as humans with the superpower of empathy and compassion. But that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. When we know the tools of how the heart learns to love, we can take advantage of this potential we have. And with this, we can stay strong to continue the work of creating beloved community and inviting others into their inherent worth and dignity too.